What's up everybody, MisterToolbox back with another Amazon Lumberyard editor video. In this brief video we'll be checking out trigger volumes and how we use them to make our levels more dynamic. So let's get started. So we've got a blank slate for this video. I'm going to go ahead and create a new level. So I'll go through that and I'll see you on the other side. So as of Lumberyard 1.4, we've got two ways of setting trigger volumes. We've got what they call legacy objects over here in the roll-up bar on the right. And we've also got components from the component palette that we can use to do the same thing. Components and entities are still in preview, so for this video, we'll focus on the legacy objects with the roll-up bar. To see how triggers behave in our level, we're going to need a couple of objects, so let's place those now. First off, we'll need the trigger itself, so we'll click Entity, we'll come down to Triggers, expand that, and we'll grab a proximity trigger. You can drop that anywhere. Right about there looks good. Since we're using a blank level and we've got really no frame of reference for anything, what I'm also going to do is come over to the Terrain Editor tab, click the Layer Painter, select a color, doesn't matter which it is, we'll go green, okay. Get the circle right under that new trigger, and we'll just click a couple times so that when we're moving around the level we can see where we theoretically should be to trigger that volume. Next I'll need something for the trigger to act on, so we're going to head back to the object selector, into Entity, and we'll grab a light. Lights are kind of the traditional object to use here, so I'm going to grab that, place it just a slight bit up in the air. That should be good enough. Now we're ready to go. In order to trigger this proximity volume, we'll need a player controller. So I'll head into Database View, open the Prefabs Library tab, click the open icon. We'll select Character Controllers.xml, click OK. And here we can expand this drop down. We're going to grab Sphere Controller, drop it in our viewport, and click to place them. Click the X. And now what I want to do is just drag it a little bit further away so that he's not in the collider by default. And that'll work great. You can tell where we're going with this. We're going to want the light to turn on when we enter our proximity trigger. So to make sure that happens, let's click the light, and over in the roll-up bar in the entity properties, let's go ahead and untick active so that that light is off by default. Perfect. We want our proximity trigger to have some behavior, and in Lumberyard when we think behavior we think flow graph. So I'm going to select the proximity trigger, right click it, create flow graph. We'll call this FG prox. Go ahead, click OK, that'll bring up our flow graph window. So we're going to need two things to make this work. One, a reference to our proximity trigger, and two, a reference to the light we want to toggle. So let's add those now. I'm going to right click and we will add graph default entity. That'll add a node for the default entity of this graph, which is our proximity trigger. Next I'll shove this out of the way because I'll want to select our light in the viewport. When I have that selected, I can go back to my flow graph, right click again, and add selected entity. Now that we've got those, we can drag our wires and show this in action. The behavior we're after is super simple, so all we'll need to do is drag from enter on the proximity trigger to enable on the light, and drag from leave on the proximity trigger to disable on the light. Back in our viewport, it's high noon, and nothing says futility quite like a point light in broad daylight. So let's go ahead and change the time of day so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to click the time of day in the toolbar right here. It's that icon. And let's change this to say, we'll go about 5:30-ish. 5:20, good enough. Now it's dark enough we'll actually see that light when and if it turns on. With that last little bit of housekeeping out of the way, we're ready to give it a shot. So I'm going to click in the viewport, and then I'll press Ctrl-G on the keyboard to switch to game mode. Straight ahead of me you can see the green spot we painted on the floor, so I'm going to roll towards it. And there we go, light turns on. Roll backwards. Lights off. On. Off. Perfect. So that all worked great, but let's do something a little bit more complex. I'm going to click on my proximity trigger, right click, and then open the flow graph we've been working on. Drag that back into view here. And let's change the behavior on leave. I'm going to hold shift and just drag this off so that I break that connection. How about we insert a delay? I'm going to come up here to search keyword and just type delay. And then under time, we'll just grab the delay node. We'll drop it right in here. So this delay is in seconds. I'm going to say 5. Got to make sure to click enter when you type that in. So we'll drag the leave output into the in on time delay, and then we'll put the out from that into disable. Take that, shove it back out of the way, and let's try this again. We'll see what we get. So again, we'll roll forward. The light turns on as we enter the proximity trigger, and now if we back away outside the proximity trigger and give it a moment, that light will turn off. Well, that's all I've got for now. This was just a basic brief introduction to how proximity triggers work. And there's a world of things you can do once you kind of have the basics down, but I just wanted to show how the flow graph gets put together with actors, things like that. Now that you've got a grip on that, put them to use in your level. Let me know how you get on. If you have any questions, comments, please drop them in the comments below. Any requests for future videos, also put them in the comments for me. Thanks a lot.